us about this incredible grape variety, Timorasso.
Consider that in 1987 there was only 1 acre left, half an hectare more or less, so almost zero. And then Walter Massa, our good father for Timorasso, decided to try to grow this grape again, trying to vinify. At the beginning was not so exciting because there was not technology for white wines in our area, because it was more dedicated to red wines, mainly Barbera. And after a few years aging this wine, it was crystal clear. It was a great variety.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today I'm delighted to continue a special sub-series that highlights the winners of the prestigious 5-Star Wines competition that took place in April, just before Vigneti 2025. Those wines that scored more than 90 points were awarded certificates and have been included in the 5-Star Wines 2025 book, while the very best wines in each category were singled out for special awards. Today we traveled to Piedmont, to the Colli Tortonesi, to meet my guest, Gian Paolo Repetto of Vigneti Repetto, whose wine, Dertona Quadro 2022 Colli Tortonese DOC, scooped the Best White Wine Award, scoring 95 points. Many congratulations, Gian Paolo. This is a fabulous achievement and award. I was one of the judges myself, and I know how rigorous this competition is, with more than 2,000 wines submitted for tasting and judgment. So you must be very pleased with the award. Thanks for joining us, and how are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the words you spent. I'm happy to be here and to describe what we do.
Great. Well, Gian Paolo, just to begin with, as we start our conversation, I think many of our listeners are located all around the world, and they may not know where the Colli Tortonesi are. So can you give a description, a visual description, so that we can gain a picture of the world you live in?
So we are located, as you said, in Colli Tortonesi, that we call Terra d'Ertona because the name of the wine. And we are in the northwest part of Italy. I didn't talk about Piedmont because it's easier to understand. Looking at Italy, we are in the northwest part on the top. And inside Piedmont, we are in the southeast, on the opposite. We are the gate of Piedmont. The city of Tortona, our little capital, is the gate to access Piedmont from all other regions.
Okay, that's a good description. And Gian Paolo, just to help our listeners, if they, for example, flew to Genova, it's not that far to Genova from your area of Piedmont, is that right?
Is that right? Because we are located in Piedmont, but we are located in between Genoa and Milan, actually. And so 50 minutes from Genoa and 50 minutes from Milan, in the middle, more or less.
Okay, and to Torino?
To Torino is a little bit more, 1 hour and a half. So we are in Piedmont, but in the east part, it's a little bit farther, Torino.
Okay, that's great. Now, Gian Paolo, you came from a family of farmers, but you chose originally to work in another sector. Is that right? And what brought you back to the land? Can you share with us the story of Vigneti Repetto?
Yes, as you said, I was born in a family of farmers, but I'm the black sheep of my family. So
Okay.
I decided to start a completely different business in automation and engineering. And for the first part of my life, I started the business when I was 20. And we grew quite well with 2 units in the US, Mexico, license in China, India. But that life brought me 6 months per year quite far from home. And so I decided at a certain point of my life to sell all the operation outside Italy and come back in the farm with my wife Marina. So we started to grow the farm again in 2013, more or less. And Vigneti Repetto started to produce seriously in 2015. So 10 years ago, we restarted the business, the family business entirely. And at that point, I decided to invest a little bit more. We decided to build a new winery. And since that, now we are a quite good winery in our area, and so we are trying to do a good job to produce this kind of wines, very unique.
Okay, so was the farm that you returned to your original family farm, or was it somewhere that you had to find?
It's in the same area, but I decided to start a new farm, not far from here, 10 minutes. But I decided to build a winery in the middle of our vineyards, located in Sarezzano. Sarezzano is a small village just above Tortona, our little capital. And so I can say that I didn't really start from scratch because vineyards were here, and so that's the most important part. But talking about the winery is I restarted completely, moving from the
Okay,
old one.
okay. Now, I know that your motto is Antico Metodo Moderna Tecnologia, and I'm wondering if this engineering background that you had, this working in a completely different sector with solving problems in a different way, is vital to the approach you're doing now in the winery.
Yeah, absolutely. My background probably is influencing a lot of what I do nowadays. I always say, for me, sustainability is the driver, but using the technology that we have nowadays. So it means that our motto is ancient method and modern technology, but the reason is to avoid chemicals. I know I always say, so we don't use pesticides for the weeds, but for example, we have mechanical tools that can maintain the vineyards in a quite good condition. The same, we use the temperature for the tanks. Every tanks can be warm up or cool down, and then during the fermentation, we can manage everything without chemicals. So that's my idea. I don't know, for some other example, to clean the vessels, we use an high pressure rotating tool who can use a very few water, and in the meantime works at 130 Celsius degree. I don't know if it's clear for anyone around the world, but it's above the boiling point of the water because of the high pressure. And so we don't use detergents in that way. So everything is based on technology, but in a clean way. So because when you talk about technology in wine, people usually they think something else, no? But technology can be used in the proper way or not. It depends on you.
Okay, so you're using these technological advances and mechanical means in
Yeah.
order to minimize use of sulfites, for example, or chemicals in the vineyard, pesticides, herbicides, and all of that. So that's a very important use of technology. I'd like to turn to the land itself, the Colli Tortonesi. In particular, it's an area particularly well suited to viticulture, and vines have, I imagine, been planted in this area since at least the time of the Romans, when Dertona was the ancient name for Tortona. Is that right?
Yeah, there is in the museum here in Tortona a mosaic who is the first century after Christ, and then there is a white grape on that. You know? So we don't know which kind of grape, but for sure it means there are more than 2,000 years that there is viticulture in Tortona. And so because it's an area very vocated, very suitable for good wines, for good grapes, and to grow grapes, especially because we have quite peculiar soils. And maybe you are many people that know wines, and they know Sant'Agata Fossili marls that are white marls with a lot of limestone. And Sant'Agata Fossili is a village in the center of Colli Tortonesi. And the same for the era, for the period in the Miocene. We are in between Serravalle and Tortona, and Serravagliano and Tortoniano are the area in between 20 and 10 millions ago, so characterized for this kind of soil, very good for viticulture.
Okay, actually, that Sant'Agata Fossili, of course, this is a laminated
Yeah.
marl that we find in the Barolo wine zone, for example. But I didn't know it was actually a place very near you, a little town near you
It's
that's given it the name.
Yes, it's a city, it's a village, not a city. It's a small village in the center of Colli Tortonesi Hills, where you can see so many fossils. So that's the reason, because as you know, all this part of Piedmont was flooded by the sea, was below the sea level. And so in the vineyards, you can find shells, fish bone petrified, or corals. So any kind of stuff from the bottom of the sea. And Sant'Agata Fossili is the center where this kind of Mars has been characterized.
Okay, and so this laminated marl, rich in limestone and clay, is particularly suited, and it's particularly suited to a unique grape variety that I've only heard of grown in the Colli Tortonese, and it's a grape variety that I think many listeners may not have sampled, but which has really become one of the most exciting white grapes in Italy. Tell us about this incredible grape variety, Timorasso.
Timorasso, the name is almost unknown around the world. So now, not completely, but because all the wine lovers, evoluted wine lovers, I say, they know. But it's a very old varieties that we have here. We have some notes written in the 14 and 60, more or less. And then at the beginning of the last century was after the philosopher a little bit abandoned, and then after the Second World War again. And consider that in 1987 there was only 1 acre left, half an hectare more or less, so almost zero. And then Walter Massa, our good father for Timorasso, decided to try to grow this grape again, trying to vinify. At the beginning was not so exciting because there was not technology for white wines in our area, because it was more dedicated to red wines, mainly Barbera. And after a few years aging this wine, it was crystal clear. It was a great variety. And since that, I'm the president of the consortium, so I'm happy to say what is successful now, because considering that in the 2000s, so 13 years ago, when Walter started, there were 3.5 hectares, so 10 acres, nothing in the appellation. Now we have almost 500 hectares. We were in 2015 35 members in the consortium. Now we are 117. And so everything is doing really well in this area. We are so happy what is happening. And then people that know Dertona, because Timorasso is the name of the grape, and for us, the name of the wine is Dertona, because of the old name of the city of Tortona, in order to connect the wine to the area. Uh, Now it's something that I don't know. In Italy, 100% of the Michelin star restaurant have at least one Dertona, but usually many more. And around the world, is growing constantly, and in many countries we are present. I don't know, at least 40 wineries are exporting in a very good way. So.
Okay, well, this is a really fascinating story, Gian Paolo, and it's a story that we hear of elsewhere in Italy, of ancient grape variety that was almost extinct, but through the efforts, in this case, of Walter Massa, it was saved from extinction and has now been validated and recognized as one of the great white grape varieties of Italy. And I'm amazed at the number of producers that you just mentioned, how quickly this has grown and how exciting an area this must be for you as a wine grower now to be producing a wine that is viewed around the world in such an exciting way. Gian Paolo, what makes Timorasso so exceptional as a grape variety for making great white wines?
There are some characteristics that are very peculiar to Timorasso. But okay, there are some bad that the reason because it was abandoned, and maybe we talk later. But the great characteristic of the wine are, I don't know, usually you price me with a 2022 vintage, who is for us an extremely hot and dry vintage. But this white wine maintains complexity and freshness even in a unbelievable hot vintage. That's one of the first characteristics, the characteristic that helps a lot this variety. Because I'm a little bit technical now, but even in that condition, we have very low pH and high acidity compared to other white wines that they lose the acidity immediately when it's so sunny and so hot. And that's a big advantage in terms of aging the wine, because you can age this wine for 10, 15, 20 years. We tasted at this point Dertona Timorasso with 25, 28, 30 years with very good results after a so long period, which is quite unique, especially for an Italian white wine. What we say in the appellation is that we are the only Italian white wine with the date of birth, because we decided as a consortium to age Dertona minimum 1 year. So you cannot find the current release. So 2024 is not yet on the market. So just to have an idea. So that's the real characteristic of this wine. Longevity is for sure. Longevity and aging, improving qualities.
Yes, actually, I have tasted some aged Dertonas that are just extraordinary with wonderful tertiary aromas and flavors developing with age. So it's a wine that I urge our listeners, if you can be patient, to enjoy as it evolves. You make a variety of wines from this exceptional grape variety, but let's talk about your award winning best white wine, the Dertona Quadro 2022. I'd like to read the tasting note that the 5 Star panel of judges gave to this wine, because in 5 Star, we sit as panels of 4 or 5 judges and mark wines and scores, but the very top wines, and your wine received 95 points, the highest white wine. It's tasted again and again by the expert top panel of judges, and they wrote about your wine. A great example of a grape that was almost extinct as recently as 40 years ago. Bright and intense, with scents and flavors of baked apple, ripe tropical fruits, and subtle oak. It has a lovely mouth-filling roundness supported by crisp and refreshing acidity. Impressive long finish. Is that a fair tasting note for describing your wine? And tell us about how you produce this wine.
First of all, I have to say we don't use oak for this production, but I describe all the cycle. Dertona Quadro is our Dertona Classic, and what we do is the opposite that we do with our cruise, because the single vineyard, they have all the vintage inside. Dertona Quadro is an assembling of different parcels, the best parcels, that we select every year in a different way. So it's not always exactly the same vineyards that contribute to Dertona Quadro. We decided to plant in the similar soil, but in different expositions, because we understood that in the last years, the differences between vintages is so big that it's difficult to manage only single vineyards. And so we have single parcels that we decide how to assemble. So that's the idea behind the Dertona Quadro. So looking for balance. Then we do soft pressing after the harvest, and then we stay in contact with the skins more or less for 12 hours, a very short maceration, just a little contact with the skins. After the fermentation, we rack and we move in stainless steel on the noble lees, and then we do batonnage for 9 months. I say batonnage, but it's a stirrer in stainless steel, so no oak is involved. But remaining on the lees, you give complexity and you can avoid to use sulfites because you are in protection. So that's a secondary advantage that we have doing batonnage on the lees. Once finished the cycle of batonnage, we bottle, and then we keep the wine 9 months in bottle. So we release this wine 18 months after the harvest. So that's what we do for that white wine. And that's what happened for the 2022, but also for the other vintages. The only difference year by year is the selection of different proportion in the parcels that we use.
And in changing the different proportions, is that because Quadro always has a particular style you're hoping to achieve, you're aiming to achieve?
That's the reason, because we look for the balance, not a specific style, because every vintage remain different. But for example, we had 2022 and 2023 extremely hot, and so some south exposition, they are even a little bit too much. In 2024, it was the opposite. We had so much rain that it's difficult to have another vintage like that. And so the proportion changed because the south exposition were the best exposition, 100%. And so we decided year by year to compose the wine, even if it is 100% Timorasso grape, 100% the parts that are in our vineyard. But what we don't consider enough to become Dertona Quadro goes to Piccolo Dertona, who is our entry level. So that's our idea, to keep the quality, even if it is not a single vineyard.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, Dertona is a wine of structure. This acidity that keeps it fresh and allows it to age also means that it's a great gastronomic wine. Can we turn to the gastronomy of the Colli Tortonesi? And can you tell us about some of the local specialties, piatti tipici from your area that pair well with Dertona?
Dertona is very versatile. No, it's a white wine, but you can use, especially with different aging, in many different ways. No, but in our area, we are not far from Liguria. You said we have pastel pesto, who works really well, and then we have. Medium aged cheese. In this case, we have a specific cheese called Montebore, who is the cheese selected by Leonardo da Vinci for the marriage of Isabella d'Aragone and Ludovico Sforza, which
Oh
is
my,
something unique that you can taste if you come.
yes.
So it's just a local cheese, and the shape is a shape of a wedding cake, and is raw milk, cow and sheep mixed 70% and 30%, and it's something very, very, very unique. And then we are in Piedmont, so there are risotti. So there are risotti based on carnaroli, but not only, in many different ways. So we have with the cheese, for example, the Montebore we said before, with asparagus, and in many ways. And Dertona works really well on that. Then on top of that, we have something is a nobile del Giarolo, is a salami. Nobile, it means noble, because in this area we don't produce M and culatello. It's something unique. There are only 20 producers. They age in very old caves with a specific molds, different molds that they give the taste to the salami. We usually in the winter we do verticals of Dertona and horizontals of different salami, so with different taste and different aging. So that's another way to use Dertona. And then if aged more with truffle, so with truffle it works again really well. Maybe not the young one, but you need some year to get the best. And then white meat, codfish, soups, and so shellfish, and talking to other countries, even Asian food works really well with their tone. So it's a very eclectic white wine. So.
Yes, actually, I think I can imagine Daytona in its various guises and styles working with so many different foods. I'm interested as well because the Colli Tortonesi is an area where, as you say, the prized white truffle, the Tartufo Bianco di Alba, is found in your area. And what would be the best way to experience the white truffles and with Daytona? What would you serve with the truffles?
Oh, man. So with the truffle, you need something really simple. So a tartare or fassone piemontese is an example, an egg or tajarin, so spaghetti with butter. So something simple so you can appreciate 100% the aroma of the truffle. No? So usually we use truffle with very simple dishes, high quality ingredients, but very simple. No? So that's the key for me.
Okay, okay. Now, turning to, I know our listeners would be fascinated to hear your story, to hear about this wonderful grape variety Timorasso and the wine d'Ertona. It's not an area as well visited, for example, as Alba, which is not far away. What about hospitality and visiting Vigneti Repetto? And can our listeners visit you, and can they sample some of these wonderful specialties with their Tona wines at Vigneti Repetto?
For sure, one of the reasons to visit us. Okay, we have also 5 rooms, so we can host people if they come, and we are on the top of a hill with a fantastic view. And the occasion to come in the winery is to taste all vintages that maybe on the market is much more difficult to find, and it's a unique. Opportunity when you come to a winery, so to Vigneti Repetto, but you can find many good producers in Colli Tortonesi, so there are many reasons to come. And what is quite different compared other areas, that everything is very balanced, because just to have an idea, we have in acres 3,500 acres of vineyards that represents only the 2% of the extension of the denomination. So you can find different fields, wood, everything. There is a very good balance. And so if you visit Colli Tortonesi, there are 300 kilometers of path that you can use for trekking or by bicycle or e-bike or whatever you like. So it's something that you can stay in a relaxing place, but with a very good and wine and an excellent quality of food all around. So.
Okay, well, that sounds a very, very good reason to visit. And I'd certainly like to visit you, Gian Paolo, when I'm next traveling in your area. So thank you for sharing the story of Vigneti Repetto and telling us about this extraordinary grape Timorasso, the wine produced from Dertona. And I stress to our listeners that Dertona, the name of the wine, when you see that name on a label, if you're in Tokyo or New York or Los Angeles or Buenos Aires, you know that this is a wine from the Colli Tortonese made from the Timorasso grape. And it's certainly something I urge people to try. Congratulations once again for this fantastic 5-Star Wines Best White Wine Award. And thank you for sharing your morning with us. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Grazie, Gian Paolo.
No, grazie, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you e buona giornata.
Buona giornata.
We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at ItalianWinePodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.